Dead by Daylight, a game that is loved by thousands of people and also hated by the same thousands of people. A game that is famously known for its huge collaborations with multiple horror franchises, and also a game that is famously known for its incredibly controversial game balance since its release in 2016. Back in June of 2016, Dead by Daylight was branded as an online 1v4 asymmetrical horror party game, where the aim of the game was to complete 5 generators while a terrifying axe murderer chases you down in an attempt to prevent you from leaving. Awesome concept, right? When the game was released, it had an incredibly positive reception, some even calling it the best asymmetrical horror game around. But as the game began to grow, players also started finding game-breaking bugs and balance issues that nowadays are just a staple in the game's history. Please join me as I take you on a journey to look through some of Dead by Daylight's most controversial balance changes and how the game has transformed from a broken mess into the game we play today. Nowadays in Dead by Daylight, when you are the final survivor left in a trial, the hatch will spawn. The hatch acts as an alternate way of escaping if the exit gates are inaccessible, and can be a great way of sneaking out of the trial when you're the last alive without the killer noticing. In the current patch of Dead by Daylight, the hatch is able to be closed by the killer if they find it before you do, which then activates endgame collapse. Once the bar at the top of your screen runs out and you haven't found an exit, the entity will eat you and you will have lost the game. Once the hatch has been closed, the only way to escape through it is by opening it with a key that you can find in a chest or bring it with you before the match starts. But the hatch didn't always work this way.
Oh my god, survivors, okay, many people won't know this, but survivors could open the gate and then they could hide just to spite the killer, because there was no time or nothing. If the survivors wanted to play hide and seek, you had to find them.
We did not have any, survivors could just hide forever if they wanted to. It was one of many regrettable things that thankfully the game has been polishing. And believe it or not, every time the game polishes such an obvious, horrible feature, someone will complain. Someone will complain.
Before endgame collapse got introduced to the game in 2019, killers were completely unable to shut the hatch, which nearly every single game resulted in an ego battle between the killer and the survivor in a hatch standoff. Back in the early stages of Dead by Daylight, if a survivor jumped in the hatch while the killer was around, the killer was able to press their attack button to pull the survivor out of the hatch and hook them to win the game, which meant games back then would last forever until one player eventually backs down.
Funny story, I never lost a single hatch standoff.
Really?
I don't think that's a good thing, to be on the record. I don't think there's something to be proud of.
I could keep this person in the game for an hour if I wanted to, right? I feel like a lot of people get drawn towards the game because of you could just make your opponent suffer. You know what I mean? You just, because I remember playing kill and people just used to hide in the map, pop all 5 gens and then they'd be like, all right, should we see how long it could take for the killer to... It's like, you could just do that and you could just waste an hour of just someone else's time.
If you can no longer camp the hatch for 16 hours, someone out there will be like, this is a nerf to killer. I'm a killer main. This is an attack on me as a person. Behavior did this to hurt me.
Before hatch standoffs were completely removed from the game, if a survivor didn't want to do a hatch standoff, they could indefinitely hide from the killer, again making games last forever. Hatch standoffs were a part of Dead by Daylight until 2019, almost 3 years. They were a part of the game that we look back on in hindsight and realize how broken they truly were. And I'm sure everyone can say that they're glad that the endgame collapse update completely removed hatch standoffs forever. Although, hatch standoffs weren't the only thing that were created by not having endgame collapse. We didn't think much of it at the time, but not having endgame collapse was incredibly harmful to the game.
People remember the hatch standoff, but it wasn't the only one. There were a lot of situations where you could basically be in an ego battle with somebody else, and it could last indefinitely. Nowadays, the servers have a timer of 1 hour, and if the game doesn't end in 1 hour, the game will be ended automatically. This was introduced so that cheaters couldn't hold people hostage indefinitely, right? But back in the day, there was no such thing. So there were a lot of situations where you could be stuck. If a survivor was caught in a corner and the killer camped, you were stuck there indefinitely. Indefinitely. Not even 1 hour, just indefinitely.
This is the kind of thing about BHL, honestly. Sometimes, you have the most obvious things, and, they take so long. It's like, why?
Yeah.
Why? I don't know.
On the 19th of July 2022, Behavior, the developers, released one of the most controversial patches we've received since the game came out. The 6.1.0 patch, aka the biggest meta shakeup we have seen since the game released. This game patch came with a bunch of huge changes, including 17 killer perks being reworked and 23 survivor perks being reworked. Back in 2022, the developers didn't really change the game as much as they do now, which is why the release of this chapter shocked the community to its core. After this patch had been out for some time, the community had started calling it the introduction of the gen kick meta. The reason for this being generator kicking was completely reworked with this update, along with a handful of killer perks that made kicking gens incredibly viable for the killer players.
Like 7 months of eruption, making you 30 seconds. It was, or 25 seconds of not being able to do it. It was horrendous. If you know, you know, and if you don't know, you're better off.
So the only time I've ever like deeply considered not really playing DBD, because I enjoy streaming the game, I enjoy playing the game, you know, reading the comments, like I'm in my happy, perfect place. Like there's nowhere else I'd rather be than on stream. But enduring 3 months of a killer walking up to a gen, kicking it, leaving it, kicking it, like you weren't even playing DBD anymore. I don't know what game it was, but there was just no interaction with the killer. You were just stuck in matches for 20, 30 minutes, and you just did nothing. So after a few months of that, I was like, damn, I gotta maybe I gotta play another game for a little bit. But if you
like forcefully change the meta and like you nerf the meta and you bring other stuff up to the meta, it's like it's not a good idea. Like what's a better idea is to like slowly bring up other things like to the level of the good things. 6.1 was like a forced meta switch.
Most of the killer perks that were buffed in this update were perks that are based around kicking generators to make them regress. For example, the perk Overcharge was completely changed so that when a generator is kicked, its regression speed increases from 100% to 400% regression over 30 seconds, meaning that generators were regressing incredibly fast, making it very hard for survivor players to finish them all and escape the trial. And on top of a huge selection of gen kicking killer perks being buffed, Behavior also changed perks like barbecue and chili. When hooking a survivor, all survivors who are further than 40 meters away from the hook have their aura revealed to you for 4 seconds. And before this patch, every time a survivor's hooked for the first time, you would gain a 25% stackable blood point bonus, which pushed killer players to hook each individual survivor. Since this perk had had its blood point bonus removed, tunneling and slugging has crept its way into the meta and started becoming a way bigger problem.
Worst decision, balancing wise, is to get rid of barbecue stacks.
Oh, I agree, yeah, for sure.
Because that has opened the floodgates, and that's when everyone the playstyles for killer changed dramatically. So obviously MMR also came into the play, but back then, for people that didn't know, every killer played for barbecue stacks. There was no defined win condition. Almost everyone was like, yeah, I'm just gonna hook everyone once, and then I just go, right? Like from there I go. But like you load into a game, and your goal was to hook everyone once, and then you start playing the game. That has changed drastically from now. So I think that had massive effect on the playstyles. And
either way, I do think they did a good job. Like they kept some of the strength of these perks all right, and they made it so that they're still occasionally strong. And kicking gens now is decent, right? Back then, kicking gens was really strong. Now it's decent. Now you'll remember that some time ago, kicking gens was useless. You kick a gen, it did no damage. It started regressing very, very slowly. And then if a survivor tapped it for like 0.2 seconds, that was enough, and they got back on it. So kicking gens used to be really bad, then it was way, way, way too strong, and now it's probably in a more acceptable spot. So I think they navigated that okay.
I do feel like after the perks got reworked and changed, that's when players started to be a lot more like, how can I win in 4 seconds of the game starting?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like trying to maximize that. And that's just natural with games, right? People want to, but it became less about enjoying the stuff in the game and more about like the result of the game, right?
And as much as killer playstyles were affected by this patch, survivor players also had to almost relearn the game because of how many perks were changed. Perks that were incredibly different before this patch, like Iron Will, Dead Hard, Hope, and Borrowed Time, were completely changed from how they usually functioned. As well as perks being reworked, there were also a lot of gameplay changes in this patch, such as the introduction of conspicuous actions, the addition of baseline borrowed time, and behavior fixing hundreds of bugs, along with changing how easy it is to level up your character. As much as this patch was controversial, it also gave the developers the confidence to start making these big changes more often, keeping their player base more engaged and preventing the game from becoming stale to their more dedicated player base.
I had a discussion with some other streamers about this era in DBD, and one of them said something that I thought was so insightful that it's been with me ever since. They said, you know, one of the reasons why they might have pushed this meta, it might have been an accident, who knows, right? But obviously before that we had a certain meta. The developers on purpose made a whole meta shakeup, and as a result we got the gen kick meta, right? Which is all the perks you said.
Yep.
Killers kicking a gen, they go around, they kick another gen, they kick your gen. Eventually someone goes down, all the gens explode, you get hit, you can't do gens. You let go of a gen, it loses half of its progress in what felt like seconds, right? All of that was really rough to play against the Survivor. Very repetitive, very boring. But here's the key thing. It was very easy to do. And what this streamer that I was having a discussion with pointed out is like, maybe they did this just so that the average killer feels like they're powerful and it's, you know, to make the game feel better for lower skill for players. And I thought maybe that was the objective.
Long term, I think it was good for the game. I was like, I feel like I mean, nothing is perfect, but I think, yeah, it was definitely, I think, that divides people, right? I think it was a good decision for the game, like long term.
Yeah, no, I had fun like trying out the new stuff and definitely,
Yeah.
because obviously when you make videos, it's about chase and stuff, right? But it's not up to you as the survivor and how your game goes. Like if the killer doesn't want to interact with you at all, you'll just be in a match on stream or in a video for 30 minutes and just nothing will happen. You know what I mean? Like, hey guys, just doing the gen. All right, he's kicked it. All right, he's left. All right, he's kicked it. All right, he's left. And it's like, that's fine. But after you do that, maybe 1,000 times in a row, it's just like, what?
Yeah.
What are we doing here? Why am I still here?
Like sometimes things go wrong, but it takes so long for them to get fixed. Like for example, like Call of Brian Eruption, right? That was like, it's okay if you like up, right? Like you make something unbalanced. Like the thing that I despise the most is how long it takes to fix. Okay, hot take of the day. I think Hope on 120-second timer, I liked it more. Because like nobody, like it was not meta at all. Nobody was kind of used to playing against haste. Like, because no killer ever seen it, like they actually engaged in the chase. Because nowadays, if I see a survivor that has hope, I realize that within 5 seconds. I'll
Yeah,
probably
it's
not chase them.
obvious.
Yeah, it's become really obvious.
The 7th of March 2023 held the release of one of the most poorly received Dead by Daylight chapters of all time. The Tools of Torment chapter was released, containing 2 survivors, Renato and Thalita Lyra, along with a brand new killer for the community to learn. The Skull Merchant. A killer that's ability was to place drones around the map that if survivors spent too long in, they would become exposed, prone to being downed in just one hit. In the more recent patches of Dead by Daylight, Skull Merchant's kit is completely different to when she was released. Being the most problematic killer release that Dead by Daylight has ever experienced, she has gone through some of the most dramatic reworks a killer has ever received.
This is probably the most memorable game of Dead by Daylight I've ever played. That was with Classed, Odds, and I think Leonek. And we were playing, literally, I think it was even on the PDB. We were playing on Temple of Purgation against a Skull Merchant that was holding a 3-gen on Temple of Purgation that was not even that good. And that game lasted 45 minutes and we ended up dying. I was like, oh my god. That was the moment where I was like, nah, there's no way. This is like the worst thing that has ever happened to this game.
I'm gonna give you a little piece of nugget, something that people at the time didn't know. Now, I couldn't say this at the time, but now I can, because I've been given permission. But at the time, I was a consultant for Dead by Daylight, aka a player that occasionally interacts with the devs, and we give feedback or help them out in different ways, right? There are currently consultants for DBD. Some of your content creators that you might know are consultants for DBD, right? This is separate from Fog Whispers. You probably know how it works. Your audience, well, hopefully I've explained it quickly. So even though I couldn't say it at the time, now this is a public program, but back then it was a hush-hush program. Even though I couldn't say it at the time, I felt extremely disappointed that a killer like this had come out, and we consultants couldn't really like steer it in a positive, like it didn't feel like it was any of our ideas, obviously, you know. Like I felt because I was a consultant, I felt very invested in the game being good. And when something comes out and it's not good, I felt like it was my fault, even though obviously I didn't make the killer, I didn't design the killer, I didn't, you know, I wasn't in the room. Like just because I was involved in that way, it was devastating. It was horrendous to see people giving up against the killer because they didn't like it, to see people constantly flame her, a reputation that was so bad that even when she got changed and she was better, people would still give up out of habit. It was almost culturally accepted to just disconnect against this killer, which is pretty crazy. Like no other killer has had that stigma. Even some of the worst ones haven't had it so bad. So at the time, like I told people, this is really bad, this is really bad. On the inside, I was dying. I was like...
Yeah. Although you only have to complete 5 generators in a game of Dead by Daylight, 7 will spawn. If 4 generators are completed by the survivors, 3 generators will remain. And when Skull Merchant released, she was a very, very good area control killer, which led to the rise of holding 3 gens. Holding a 3 gen means that sometimes even at the start of the game, you will spawn in as killer and find 3 of the closest generators together to patrol for the entire match. And when a character like Skull Merchant was released, she had the best power in the game for holding 3 gens. Her initial ability made it so if you were on a gen and a drone was around, you would become exposed, giving Skull Merchant a free opportunity to down you in 1 hit. Due to this incredibly boring playstyle created by this killer's power, she received an unfathomable amount of reworks, which unfortunately in the recent patches of Dead by Daylight has left her in a very, very weak position.
I think this was behavior, obviously not at the worst, but it was in one of the periods where they generally were not listening to feedback or taking feedback early, very much at all, from the community, from consultants, from fog whispers, from any other sources. And I do want to believe that that sort of killer wouldn't happen now. I think that sort of killer, hopefully, would go through more stages of like, hey, is this a good idea? Is this going to work out? Or is it just a bad idea? The Skull Merchant was a bad concept. There was no way to make it work. You could make this 1%, 1% less, 1% more, 1% less. It didn't matter. The whole idea was very, very difficult to work with. And evidence of that is the fact that they worked hard twice and she still was problematic. Some people refuse to see it because they're like, well, I'm a high level player. I knew how to counter her. Or I'm a Skull Merchant player. I really enjoyed her unique quirks. That's respectable, but especially for lower levels, she was a very confusing killer throughout all of her reworks. And yeah, I mean, as I said, evidence is the fact that they had to do so much to fix her, and we're still not even done with her. So yeah, it was a mistake, hopefully one that wouldn't happen today because of devs. I think lately it's, you know, I'm no longer a consultant, that's why I can talk about it. But I think lately they generally are listening to the consultants more. It's so obvious in some of the decisions they make. And I think the killers are going through more processes, and I think at least the idea of the killer is working out pretty well, and they're not releasing as many broken things. And if they do, it's more rare than before, so...
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I actually didn't mind her. I quite liked her. Bro, so she came out of the PTB and I was thinking, okay, she's a bit shit, but, you know, not every killer that needs to come out is good. So, like, what I liked is, it was... She placed a drone down at a tile, right? And you could choose whether you wanted to loop the tile, be exposed, or leave. So what a lot of people do is they would be like, okay, well, I'm gonna get exposed, so I'll just leave. But I kind of like that. You got exposed, and it was like, oh, damn, chase, 50-50, big mind games, you know, a lot of pressure, a lot of thing, and that's just kind of what I really like, DBD. Like, I think if we had, like, Skull Merchant the way that she was in the PTB, without all the gen kicking stuff, because a lot of that's been resolved now, where you can only kick a gen a certain amount of times, I think people would not hate her at all. I think they'd be like, oh, she's fine.
The release of the Skull Merchant sent the community into complete madness, and as a result, her reworks completely removed the expose effect from her power. Her reworked power was changed to reduce the Skull Merchant's ability to hold generator setups and making her more threatening while in a chase. While her old power made survivors exposed if they were within the detection zone of her drones, eventually, instead of being given the exposed effect, the drones were changed so that they would give survivors the broken status effect instead. Since her initial rework, her power has been changed an uncomfortable amount of times, which has eventually put her at the bottom of most Dead by Daylight killer tier lists. And as much as the community hates this killer, I'm sure we would all love to see her in a playable state again.
I think they were overboard with it, to be honest. Yeah, it was definitely too much. Like, I don't know. I think that's like a thing that oftentimes happens where you go from one extreme to the other. Like, for example, if you look at Haddonfield, right? Like the old version with the windows, and it's like, oh my god, that was so trash to play. And now there's nothing there. Like, it's literally nothing. It's like, yeah, it's not ideal because like you solve one problem, but you create the next one. It's definitely not ideal. It's way too weak. Like the first version was a complete train wreck because like conceptually, area control on killers leads to terrible gameplay. Terrible. Like it just leads to stale gameplay that nobody wants to play. And yeah, I think like it's a bit funny because like they kind of made 3 back-to-back. They made Night, Skirmish, and Singularity. I think at this point they probably learned their lesson that area control just leads to like the most stale gameplay ever. So yeah, I was definitely not a big fan.
Now that we've covered some important specifics, I thought I'd ask everyone about some other balance-related topics, because there are so many balance changes that have happened over the years that the majority of players have probably forgotten about by now. Now let's go through a few lesser known changes in Dead by Daylight's balance since the game was released.
I think the best thing they did was nerf Ruin. And you might be like, whoa, that's just one perk. That perk represented something. That was a perk that basically was used in like 9 out of 10 games at higher ranks, at the supposed high level, right? And it was so ubiquitous. It was in every game, and everybody felt like it was necessary. It was very, very, very important to the game. And some people dramatized and said, oh my god, if it changes in any way, this whole game will go up in flames. But the devs were brave. They decided, you know what, let's change it. Funnily enough, the next Ruin that they made was somehow even stronger, but we won't talk about that. But the fact that they took a step that they knew was going to piss people off because they had a vision of how the game was going to evolve in the future, I think was good. Same thing happened when Nerfs was originally a nerf. Same thing happened when survivors originally got the 10 seconds of endurance upon being unhooked. You might remember that some time ago, if you got unhooked as a survivor, and your teammate didn't have a specific perk from Bale, you could just be down immediately, literally immediately.
When I was playing with friends back then, that's like what I mainly did, to be honest. Like I was always like, before I was a streamer, I was mainly socializing and playing with friends. And if you saw Mori at the beginning of the game, you were like, oh shit, lock in. This is like that was the one game where you're like, oh my god, like it's time to sweat, you know? Like that's, I don't know, it kind of had something to it, but yeah. That stayed for so long though, no? Like
yeah, it was like
so crazy. You would think, like,
I think further.
I think it was, yeah, I think it was fun. Like, the thing is, like, that's such a easy change to make, right? Like, such an easy change to make, but it takes so long. I think DBD is impossible to balance. And it's like, I wish more people would understand this. It's like, no matter what you do, you can never balance everything for every scenario. The funny hypothetical is, why don't you just balance the maps? Well, the problem is every single killer power needs different distances between loops and like different loop strength. You cannot have a loop balance for Myers and Blight at the same time.
Yeah.
Like this is factually impossible. There's no way to do that. That will probably never get solved, to be honest. But like I wish people would have a higher understanding for this and like they would think it through more thoroughly. Because if you actually do, then surely everyone will agree that like these things are just not possible.
I made a video detailing like the very curious case of the Trapper, because in paper he's only received buffs, but in theory he should be stronger than ever. But the thing is, the game has changed around him so much that it doesn't matter how much he's been buffed, he still lags behind, and he's possibly right now arguably the worst killer in the game.
With Trapper being the poster boy of Dead by Daylight, he's started to have it quite difficult as the game has evolved around him. The sheer simplicity of his killer power, combined with the new killer powers that are being added to the game multiple times a year, Trapper's power of simply just placing bear traps gets completely overwhelmed.
I think Trapper used to be pretty fun, being able to hide traps in a lot of places with cheeky little mountains of rubble or grass that was pretty thick. That was what made me enjoy Trapper a lot. But then when the graphical rework happened, the game became really bright. Many of the areas had grass that was not thick at all. The grass is in really not helpful spots when it is there. Some maps, like for example Erie, have no grass whatsoever, or if they do, it's very thin and it's in a spot where a trap would obviously do nothing. So right now, the Trapper is, that element of like fun traps is very much gone, especially considering that people nowadays are not stupid. They know how to play against Trapper. It's been a few years, right? Now, why doesn't he get a proper rework or a proper change? I also have discussed this many times. Basically, the Trapper is a simple killer. They want to keep him simple. I understand that. I respect that. And one thing that hurts the Trapper, and you're not going to believe this, is he's actually fairly good. Like, at low levels, he is lethal enough that the developers look at the numbers and they don't think, we need to buff him, because he gets enough kills. That's good. And at high levels, I'll be honest, I don't think anyone plays Trapper. I think there are 3 people playing Trapper right now at high level, and all of them are probably insane at him, and Survivor's going to basement, and then they go down next to basement, and yep, it goes from 1 basement to 4 kills. So yeah, his stats are fine. Because his stats are fine, the developers don't see it as a big priority. And sadly, he doesn't seem to have been getting a lot of love, and I don't think he will, possibly for a long time. So the Trapper is a prisoner of his own success, in a way.
The Trapper is one of the only killers in the game that is actively being nerfed as the game evolves. So many things like graphic settings that would never affect any other killer in the game somehow are Trapper's worst enemy. And one of his biggest problems is that behavior can't really change him too much. Being the poster killer for Dead by Daylight, he's been the same since the release. So changing the Trapper at this point in the game's success would be a huge risk for the developers.
I think the way that these stats are good for Trapper, I think is in a very, very skewed and unfun way. Like, you can have a game of Trapper, right, where you get 0 hooks, 0 kills, and it's horrible. And then one game where 1 person goes down next to basement, and you win. Yeah, it's in the most boring, unhealthy, unfun, unintuitive playstyle possible that probably is awful to play against, but hey, now you get 4 kills. So on average, hey, pretty good. Yeah, it's a bit disappointing. It's not the end of the world. There's a lot of other killers that are very enjoyable. I do wish they would bring back a little bit of grass. I do wish they would look at each map and be like, what can the Trapper even do here? In my opinion, the biggest thing I would do to Trapper is make him worse at defending the basement. Right now, one of the best gameplays is 3 traps around basement shack. What can you do about it? The reality is very little. Make him worse at that type of like very boring defensive playstyle that hopefully no one should enjoy, and make him better at everything else. Give him stealth at the start of the game to put some traps down. Let him carry more traps. Make the grass a little bit better. Maybe make some of his add-ons base good. For example, if a survivor is injured and they're partially healed, say they're 99 healed because they have resilience, and they step on a trap, is it fair that they can now heal from 99 to 100? Shouldn't the trap put them in like deep wound or reset their healing progress? Little things like that could be nice. But as I said, because his stats are fine, I guess the devs are not really worried about him.
First thing I think about when it comes to, or it has to be Dead Hard, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, fair enough.
For the first like 3,000 hours where I played DVD, I did not touch Killer at all. And I only played Survivor. I always played Dead Hard. Like pretty much since like 500 hours. At some point I understood, okay, this perk is busted. I'm going to play this. It's like, oh, there are a few things like 7 Blink Nurse, old Morris that could kill after 1 hook, old Metal of Man, that's also a big one.
Yep.
Like a lot of, like back then, like you talked about balance, right? Back then, DBD was like the Wild West. Like if you really wanted to win on both sides, you could easily win. You could bring out the nuclear options, and the other side wouldn't stand much of a chance.
Solo queue, like when you play solo queue Survivor, could be balanced if everyone else was on the same skill level, right? So you could have a killer who's really, really good. You as a solo queue Survivor could be really, really good. But if you have just one teammate who's not as good, then it's not balanced, right? I don't know. Does it just all come back to matchmaking, maybe? I don't know. I guess it could, but... And then it's like new players as well might need more palettes and more map. I don't really know. You could do like matchmaking depending on how high you get, how many loops there are and shit. I don't really know. One thing I have noticed now is the killer players have gotten insanely better at the game. So let's say we start off 2016, you have a solo queue Survivor and then a not solo queue killer, but you know, a killer and a solo queue Survivor. The rate at which you gain experience at now. As killer, let's say for example for like level wise, you'd be at 10, and then the survivor would be at 10. I feel like now it's like, oh, I don't know. I feel like the killer is just substantially way better than the average survivor now. Like killers are just so much better. I think that's why like a lot of survivors will get. What was the question again? Sorry. Killers have definitely got a lot better, but I don't mind that, right? I think it just, the main thing that sucks for me is, you know, I like learning the game, countering it, you know, trying different perks out and getting them to work in stupid situations, or just, can I get this perk to win the entire game? And it'll be a shit perk. You know, like, this is not happening or something. But I think a killer nowadays, you know, which is quite smart of them, will just see a survivor who knows, you know, somewhat what they're doing and just be like, actually, let me chase the Meg with 3 hours. Oh. And then, you know, that will win the game. But the frustration that leads to is that you just get ignored. Like, you don't really get any interaction. You don't really get to gain any more experience.
Yeah.
So I think that's like definitely the biggest thing for me at the moment is just killer sees that you're somewhat decent and just ignores you. And you can go 6, 7, 8 games in a row and just have max chase-wise under a minute because they just refuse.
Dead by Daylight has one of the most misunderstood communities of all time, and a lot of it does come from controversial game balance. Sometimes people online associate their opinion of the game with the quality of its community. Lots of people online portray this community in such a terrible way, when in reality, the year I've been involved in this community, I have received nothing but kindness. Everyone I've met is amazing, and the things the Dead by Daylight community do when they come together are nothing short of amazing. The truth is, this community isn't as toxic as it's portrayed online, and unfortunately, the bad always outshines the good.
I mean, it's very simple. Like, you look up videos of, I had a positive interaction with a streamer, and you're gonna find 3 of them.
Yeah.
And you look up videos of, oh my god, toxic streamer shamed me in front of his community and did what? 1 trillion views. Why? Because this game, at any point, it can piss you off. It's gonna piss you off. You're gonna play killer and you're gonna feel, whoa, this is unfair. You're gonna play survivor and you're gonna feel, this isn't right. And then you're gonna look up on the internet for people that agree with you because you want validation. You know, videos and headlines and posts with controversy are always going to perform a little bit better. It's okay to acknowledge that. It's okay. It's okay to realize that there's a lot of bad apples and stuff. But let's also not forget that like the DBD community has generally some really, really good things going on. We routinely pull together to uplift people in trouble. We raise thousands of dollars for a sick streamer. We raised another thousands of dollars for another streamer that had cancer. We've raised innumerable amounts of funds for St. Jude and other causes. Like, yeah, and one thing that I think is very common is that because the community is so big and so diverse, sometimes people call the community hypocritical just because there's people with different opinions, right? Like, some people will be like, oh, survivors want you to play nice, but then they complain if you play nice, and they do. Yeah, because there's a lot of people and everyone has a different opinion, so you're always gonna find people that have completely opposite views on the same subjects. It's okay to acknowledge it and not to think that the community is all crazy. It just happens.